Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and read the message from the Galactic Council for the third time. The words made his blood boil every time he saw them. The Council had given humanity 30 days to leave 3 colony worlds that humans had discovered and built with their own hands. The message was clear and cold like a slap in the face. The Council treated humans like children who had wandered into someone else's backyard. They spoke about territorial protocols and proper procedures as if humanity had never learned to think for themselves. Jake crushed the paper message in his fist and looked out at the stars that his people had fought so hard to reach. Captain Lisa Rodriguez called in from the colony world Kepler 442b, where 50,000 humans had made their homes. Her voice carried worry and anger as she spoke about families who had spent 5 years building farms and schools and hospitals. These people had left Earth with dreams of a better life among the stars. Now some alien council wanted them to pack up and run away like scared animals. Jake had studied the council races for months after first contact. The Veltar controlled the largest territory and acted like they owned the galaxy. The Zephyrians had technology that could destroy planets, but had not fought a real war in 300 years. The Crystalline Collective thought with one mind and could not understand why humans valued individual choice. All of them looked at humanity and saw primitive weapons and simple technology. What they did not see was the fire that burned in every human heart. Earth had never known true peace. Humans had fought each other for thousands of years over land and resources and ideas. Every human child learned about wars that had shaped their world. Every human soldier carried the knowledge of battles won and lost by courage and cunning, rather than superior weapons. Commander Rick Sullivan finished his intelligence report and sent it to the Global Defense Council on Earth. His analysis was simple and terrifying. The Council had forgotten what real war looked like. They fought with rules and honor and expected their enemies to surrender when defeat seemed certain. They had never faced an enemy that would fight to the last breath, to protect their families. President Helen Carter read the reports from the colonies and the intelligence files about Council military forces. She knew that humanity stood at a crossroads that would determine their future among the stars. They could obey the Council and accept a place as servants in someone else's galaxy, or they could show these aliens what humans were truly capable of when pushed too far. The decision was not easy, but it was simple. No human leader could order 50,000 colonists to abandon their homes because aliens demanded it. No human military could stand by while families were threatened by forces that had never earned the right to command them. The Council wanted to see primitive humans behave like civilized species. They were about to learn the difference. General Paul Hayes received his orders and began planning the most dangerous operation in human history. The Council expected humans to run or beg or fight with desperate courage against impossible odds. They expected a quick victory that would serve as an example to other young species who might challenge galactic order. Hayes smiled grimly as he realized how perfectly the Council had walked into humanity's trap. The plan that emerged from the military meetings was elegant and brutal. Humanity would not fight the kind of war the Council expected. They would not line up their ships for honorable battle or limit themselves to military targets. When the Council came to destroy human colonies, they would face the full fury of a species that had learned warfare in the hardest school possible. Captain Amy Foster commanded one of the stealth ships that had been disguised as mining vessels for the past year. Her crew had spent months preparing hidden weapons platforms throughout the system. They had studied Council tactics and identified weaknesses that 3 centuries of peace had created in their military thinking. The aliens thought they knew what human desperation looked like. They had no idea what human planning could accomplish. The colonies themselves had been transformed over the past months. What looked like simple farming communities and research stations were actually sophisticated military bases designed to survive the worst attacks. Underground tunnels connected every building to hidden command centers that could coordinate defense operations. Civilian evacuation ships were equipped with military-grade weapons and armor. Even the children had been trained in basic combat procedures. Jake Morrison reviewed the final attack plans one more time and felt the weight of history on his shoulders. In 30 days, the Council fleet would arrive expecting to find panicked humans begging for mercy. Instead, They would face a species that had spent every day of their existence preparing for exactly this kind of fight. The galaxy was about to receive an education in human nature that it would never forget. The message went out to every human ship and station in the system. Operation Righteous Fury would begin the moment Council forces entered the system. There would be no warning shots or attempts at negotiation. The Council had made their intentions clear when they threatened human families. Humanity's response would be equally clear and far more permanent. As the days counted down to the Council's arrival, Jake watched his crews prepare for battle with quiet efficiency. These men and women understood what they were fighting for. They were not defending territory or resources or political ideas. They were protecting the right of human children to grow up free among the stars. That was worth any price the galaxy might demand. The Council had made a simple mistake that countless enemies had made throughout human history. They had looked at humanity's weapons and technology and assumed they understood human capabilities. They had never bothered to study human psychology or human history or human determination. They were about to learn that the most dangerous weapon humanity possessed was not any machine or bomb, but the simple refusal to accept defeat when their families were threatened. In 3 days, the Council fleet would arrive and the real war would begin. The Council fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly when human intelligence had predicted they would. High Admiral Zethkar of the Veltar examined the human colonies through his ship's sensors and felt satisfied with what he saw. Scattered civilian vessels moved frantically between the worlds trying to evacuate families. Desperate radio calls begged for more time to complete the evacuation. A small human military force seemed to be protecting the fleeing ships, but their formation looked confused and poorly organized. Zethkar had commanded fleet operations for 40 years and had seen this scene many times before. Young species always tried to resist at first, but they learned quickly that cooperation was easier than destruction. The humans would make some brave gestures and fire a few shots to preserve their honor. Then they would surrender and accept their place in the galactic order like every other species had done. The Admiral opened communications with the human fleet commander, who identified himself as General Paul Hayes. The human's voice carried exactly the right mixture of fear and desperation that Zethkar expected to hear. Hayes pleaded for more time and claimed his ships were overloaded with civilians. He insisted that humanity wanted no conflict with the Council and only needed a few more days to complete their evacuation. Zethkar allowed himself a moment of amusement at the human's obvious terror. The general's voice shook as he described families trapped on the surface and evacuation ships that could barely fly. It was almost pathetic how quickly these fierce humans had collapsed when faced with real opposition. The Admiral decided to grant them 6 more hours as a gesture of Council mercy before beginning the demonstration bombardment. What Zethkar did not know was that General Hayes was broadcasting from a heavily armored command bunker 300 meters underground. The human officer was not trembling with fear, but with barely controlled excitement as he watched Council ships move into perfect attack positions. Every word of his desperate plea had been carefully rehearsed to draw the enemy fleet exactly where humanity wanted them. Captain Amy Foster watched from her concealed position in the asteroid belt as the Council ships arranged themselves in standard formation around the 3 human worlds. Her stealth ship had been drifting cold and silent for 6 hours, waiting for this moment. Around her, dozens of similar vessels prepared to reveal themselves when the trap was finally sprung. The humans had spent months studying Council tactics and had designed their ambush to exploit every weakness in alien military thinking. The Council believed in overwhelming force applied in predictable patterns. They positioned their largest ships where they could demonstrate maximum firepower, while keeping their support vessels in safe formations behind them. It was textbook galactic warfare that had worked successfully for centuries against every opponent they had ever faced. Against humanity, it was about to become a death trap. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Parker commanded the hidden defense networks that had been built into each colony world over the past year. What the Council sensors detected as simple mining operations and agricultural centers were actually sophisticated military installations designed to appear harmless until the moment they were needed. Underground factories had been producing weapons and ammunition while fake civilian buildings concealed massive gun positions. The signal came at exactly 1400 hours, when Admiral Morrison transmitted the code words that would change galactic history forever. Operation Righteous Fury was authorized and all human forces were cleared to engage with maximum force. Parker smiled grimly as he activated defense systems that would introduce the galaxy to human concepts of total warfare. The first phase began, not with weapons but with information warfare that the Council had never encountered before. Commander Danny Wright led a team of cyber specialists who had spent years learning how Council computer systems worked. The moment human forces received authorization to attack Wright's team, launched viruses through the Council's own communication networks that turned their advanced targeting computers into weapons against their own ships. Admiral Zethkar watched, in horror, as half his fleet began firing on friendly vessels without any orders from their commanders. His communications officer reported that their computer networks were being attacked by some kind of intelligent program that was spreading between ships faster than they could shut down their systems. Ships that had been preparing to bombard human colonies suddenly found their weapons turned against their own formation. But the cyber attack was only the beginning of humanity's demonstration. Captain Rose Miller commanded a ship that the Council had identified as a simple cargo hauler, but was actually humanity's most advanced weapons platform. When she received the attack signal, Miller activated systems that released thousands of small hunter-killer drones that swarmed toward the Council fleet like angry insects. The galaxy had always fought wars with large, sophisticated fighters piloted by skilled warriors who followed ancient codes of honor. Humanity had designed weapons that had no honor and no mercy and no purpose except to destroy everything they encountered. The hunter-killer drones were too small for Council weapons to target effectively, but each one carried enough explosive power to crack a capital ship's hull if it reached the right location. Zethkar tried to rally his forces, but the human attack had been designed to create maximum chaos and confusion. His command ship's computers were reporting impossible readings as waves of tiny attackers overwhelmed his defensive systems. Council ships that had ruled the galaxy for centuries found themselves helpless against weapons that violated every assumption about how civilized warfare should be conducted. General Hayes opened communications with the Council fleet as their formations began to collapse under the unexpected assault. His voice had changed completely from the desperate pleading of an hour earlier to the cold certainty of a predator who had cornered his prey. He informed Admiral Zethkar that humanity had tried diplomacy and peaceful cooperation, but the Council had chosen to threaten human families instead. The Admiral attempted to order a general retreat, but discovered that his communications had been compromised and his ships could no longer coordinate their movements. Human cyber weapons had infected every system in his fleet and were spreading chaos faster than his crews could respond. When he tried to surrender, Hayes informed him that species who threatened human children did not get to surrender when the battle turned against them. The trap had been perfect and the Council fleet was completely helpless. In 2 hours, humanity had demonstrated that 3 centuries of peace had made the galaxy's greatest military force soft and predictable. The real lesson was just beginning as human forces prepared to show the galaxy what total war actually looked like when conducted by a species that had never known true peace. The Battle of Three Worlds entered its second phase when humanity stopped pretending to be civilized. What the galaxy witnessed in the next 3 hours destroyed every assumption they had made about human nature and human capabilities. The Council, fleet that had arrived expecting easy victory, found themselves facing a kind of warfare that their species had never imagined possible. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Parker activated the second wave of planetary defenses and watched as his hidden weapons platforms emerged from camouflaged positions across all 3 colony worlds. The buildings that Council sensors had identified as farms and schools and hospitals opened like flowers to reveal gun positions that had been constructed by mining equipment, but designed by military engineers who understood exactly how to kill alien spacecraft. The weapons that emerged were not the honorable plasma cannons or quantum disruptors that galactic militaries preferred. Humanity had spent decades developing what their military called dirty warfare systems, designed specifically to destroy any force that threatened human civilians. The first barrage consisted of kinetic projectiles accelerated to significant fractions of light speed by magnetic rail systems that could punch through any known armor. Admiral Zethkar watched his flagship's shields collapse under impacts from weapons that should not have been able to penetrate Council defensive technology. His tactical officer reported that the human projectiles were not using energy fields or exotic particles, but simple dense metals moving at impossible velocities. The humans were using the oldest weapons in the galaxy, but had somehow made them more deadly than anything the Council possessed. But the kinetic bombardment was only the beginning of humanity's demonstration. Captain Rose Miller's hunter-killer. Drones had reached the Council fleet and began their primary mission of systematic destruction. Unlike the large, sophisticated fighters that galactic militaries use, these human weapons were small and numerous, and absolutely relentless in their pursuit of targets. Each drone carried enough explosive power to crack a capital ship's hull, but they were programmed to attack in coordinated swarms that could overwhelm any defensive system through sheer numbers. The Council had never faced weapons that attacked like living creatures with pack intelligence and no concern for their own survival. Their point defense systems had been designed to stop missiles and fighters, not clouds of mechanical predators. The psychological warfare began when human forces activated systems that attacked the minds of Council personnel rather than their ships and weapons. Commander Danny Wright's cyber warfare team had discovered that most galactic species use direct neural interfaces with their technology. Human viruses did not just attack Council computers, but the minds connected to those computers through their advanced interface systems. Council crew members began reporting hallucinations and memory loss as human cyber weapons invaded their thoughts through their own technology. Warriors who had never known fear found themselves paralyzed by terror, as human psychological attacks triggered primitive survival instincts that their civilized minds could not control. The humans were not just destroying Council ships, but the sanity of everyone aboard them. Colonel Ben Turner led human marine boarding parties that attacked Council vessels with tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Instead of seeking honorable combat between soldiers, the humans used stealth and ambush and psychological terror to destroy their enemies' will to fight. Marine teams moved through Council ships like ghosts, leaving behind crew members who were either dead or driven insane by encounters with human combat techniques. The galaxy had always fought wars with respect for surrender and concern for civilian populations, and limits on acceptable weapons and tactics. Humanity fought wars to win, completely and utterly regardless of cost to themselves or their enemies. When Admiral Zethkar attempted to surrender, General Hayes' response became legendary throughout the galaxy for its cold brutality. Hayes informed the Admiral that the Council had come to destroy human families and therefore had forfeited any right to mercy or quarter. Human forces would continue their attack until every Council ship was destroyed or captured, regardless of any attempt to end hostilities. The humans were demonstrating that they did not fight wars but conducted extermination campaigns against anyone who threatened their people. Captain Amy Foster's stealth ship revealed itself and began hunting Council vessels that tried to escape the battle zone. Her ship had been designed specifically for pursuit operations against fleeing enemies and carried weapons that could disable faster-than-light drives at extreme range. The humans were ensuring that no Council survivor would escape to report what they had experienced until humanity was ready to deliver their message to the galaxy. The Council fleet began to collapse as human weapon systems demonstrated capabilities that should not have been possible with their primitive technology. Human engineers had spent decades finding ways to make simple kinetic weapons and chemical explosives more deadly than the most advanced galactic military systems. They had studied every weakness in Council defensive technology and designed specific weapons to exploit those weaknesses. Admiral Morrison broadcast a message to the dying Council fleet that explained exactly what they were experiencing. Humanity had been preparing for this moment since their first contact with galactic civilization. Every human colony ship had carried hidden military equipment, and every human settler had received combat training. The Council had not attacked 3 defenseless worlds, but 3 military bases disguised as civilian settlements. The Admiral informed the Council forces that they were witnessing the difference between species that had grown soft during centuries of peace and a species that had never stopped preparing for war. Humanity had spent thousands of years fighting each other and had learned lessons about warfare that the galaxy had forgotten. The Council was receiving an education in human military thinking that would cost them everything they had. As the fourth hour of battle began, not a single Council ship remained combat effective. Some had been destroyed outright by human weapons, while others had been captured by boarding parties who fought with savagery that traumatized even veteran Galactic Marines. The rest had been driven insane by psychological warfare techniques that attacked the fundamental assumptions about reality that civilized minds required to function. General Hayes transmitted the final status report that would be sent to Earth and to human forces throughout the galaxy. The Battle of Three Worlds was complete and human victory was absolute. The Council fleet that had arrived to demonstrate galactic superiority had been completely destroyed by a species they had dismissed as primitive and harmless. The real war was just beginning as humanity prepared to deliver a message that would echo throughout every inhabited system in the galaxy. The destruction of the Council fleet at Three Worlds was only the opening statement in humanity's message to the galaxy. Admiral Morrison had spent months planning what would happen after the battle was won, and the real work of changing galactic civilization could begin. The aliens needed to understand that attacking human colonies had consequences that would reach into every corner of their territory. Colonel Ben Turner transmitted his final boarding report from the captured Council flagship, where High Admiral Zethkar sat in restraint, staring at nothing with the blank expression of someone whose mind had been broken by experiences it could not process. The proud Veltar commander, who had arrived expecting easy victory, could no longer speak coherently about what had happened to his fleet. Turner's Marines had captured approximately 12,000 Council personnel, but many of them required immediate medical attention for what their own doctors called combat-induced psychological trauma. The galaxy's finest warriors had been reduced to trembling shadows by encounters with human combat techniques that attacked their fundamental beliefs about how civilized beings should behave during warfare. But Admiral Morrison was not finished with his demonstration. The Battle of Three Worlds had been designed to show the Council what happened when they threatened human families. Phase 2 of Operation Righteous Fury would show them what happened when they continued to exist as a threat to humanity's future expansion among the stars. Captain Nina Thompson received her orders aboard the ship that the Council had been tracking as a simple cargo hauler for the past 2 years. The ESS Retribution was actually humanity's most advanced warship, built specifically for what military planners called demonstration operations. Her mission was simple and terrifying in its implications for galactic civilization. Thompson's target was Veltar Prime, the homeworld of the species that had issued humanity's ultimatum and commanded the fleet that had threatened human colonies. Her orders were to arrive in the system, disable their orbital defenses, and deliver a message that would ensure the galaxy never underestimated humanity again. The Veltar would learn what it meant to have their own families threatened by a superior military force. The jump to Veltar Prime took 18 hours, during which Thompson's crew prepared systems that most galactic species considered impossible to build with current technology. Human engineers had spent decades developing weapons that violated the basic assumptions about what civilized warfare should look like. The Retribution carried devices that could destroy entire star systems if humanity decided that such destruction was necessary. When the lone human ship emerged from hyperspace in the Veltar system, it was immediately surrounded by nearly 1,000 ships representing the entire home fleet of one of the galaxy's most powerful military forces. Admiral Kethmos, the supreme commander of Veltar Space Forces, opened communications with the human vessel, expecting to negotiate the terms of their surrender. Thompson's response was broadcast on every frequency across the system and recorded by monitoring stations throughout Veltar space. She informed Admiral Kethmos that his forces had exactly 1 hour to evacuate all orbital stations and withdraw their fleet beyond the outer planets of their own system. Any ship that remained would be destroyed, and any station that continued operating would be eliminated without further warning. The Veltar military leadership response was exactly what human intelligence had predicted it would be. They laughed at the idea that a single primitive human ship could threaten the combined might of their home fleet. Admiral Kethmos informed Captain Thompson that her vessel would be destroyed as an example to other species who might consider challenging Veltar authority. Thompson activated the first demonstration weapon exactly 1 hour after delivering her warning. The device that human scientists called a quantum disruptor field began systematically disabling every piece of advanced technology in the Veltar system. Orbital stations that had protected the homeworld for centuries simply stopped functioning, as their power systems were destroyed by weapons that attacked the fundamental forces that held matter together. The Veltar fleet discovered that their ships could no longer maintain power to their weapons or defensive systems as human technology demonstrated capabilities that should not have existed according to galactic scientific understanding. Admiral Kethmos watched in horror as the pride of his civilization was reduced to helpless metal shells, drifting in space around their own home world. Colonel Jack Foster, the Retribution's weapons officer, activated the second phase of what humanity called the Damocles Protocol. Instead of destroying Veltar Prime outright, the human ship demonstrated that they possessed weapons capable of destabilizing the system's star, a device that human scientists had developed in secret for exactly this purpose was deployed into the stellar core where it would remain as a permanent threat. Captain, Thompson opened communications with the planetary government of Veltar Prime and delivered humanity's message to the billions of civilians on the surface. She informed them that their sun now contained a human weapon that could cause it to go nova at any time humanity decided such action was necessary. The device would remain in place as long as any galactic power continued to threaten human colonies or human expansion. The demonstration lasted exactly 63 minutes, during which humanity reduced the most powerful military force in that sector of the galaxy to complete helplessness. The Veltar had ruled dozens of star systems for thousands of years, but could not defend their own homeworld against a single human ship carrying weapons they could not understand or resist. Admiral Kethmos attempted to negotiate some kind of agreement that would preserve Veltar independence, but Thompson informed him that humanity was not interested in negotiations or agreements. The galaxy had been given multiple opportunities to treat humanity as equals, but had chosen to issue ultimatums and threaten human families instead. The captain explained that the age of galactic powers dictating terms to younger species was ending, and a new era was beginning in which humanity would conduct its affairs according to its own interests and values. Species that chose to cooperate with human expansion would be treated as allies, while those that opposed humanity would face the same fate as the Council fleet at 3 worlds. As the Retribution prepared to leave Veltar space, Thompson transmitted the final component of humanity's message to the galaxy. Complete recordings of both the Battle of 3 Worlds and the demonstration at Veltar Prime would be broadcast to every inhabited system within 50 light years. The galaxy would see exactly what happened to military forces that threatened human civilians. The psychological impact of the recordings would be far more devastating than the military defeat itself. Galactic civilization had been built on the assumption that advanced species fought wars according to civilized rules with respect for surrender and concern for civilian populations. Humanity had demonstrated that they recognized no such limitations when their own families were threatened. Admiral Morrison received Thompson's mission completion report and began the next phase of humanity's expansion into galactic politics. The age of asking permission and following alien rules was over, and the age of human dominance among the stars was about to begin. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after the demonstration at Veltar Prime, with representatives from over 3,000 species attending either in person or through quantum communication links. The assembly hall that had witnessed centuries of peaceful deliberation now buzzed with fear and uncertainty, as delegates struggled to understand what humanity's actions meant for the future of galactic civilization. Ambassador Claire Watson entered the great chamber wearing the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic service and carrying herself with quiet confidence that made veteran politicians nervous. She had been chosen specifically for this moment because her background combined diplomatic training with military experience that would help her communicate with species who only understood strength. High Chancellor Mort Hahn of the Council called the session to order and began reading the formal charges against humanity for unprovoked attacks on peaceful Council forces and threats against civilian populations. The Chancellor's voice carried the authority of millennia of galactic law, But Watson noticed how his hands shook as he spoke about human violations of civilized conduct. Watson rose to address the assembly when the Chancellor finished his recitation of human crimes against galactic order. Her voice carried clearly through the vast chamber as she explained that humanity had not come to defend their actions or request forgiveness for protecting their families. They had come to inform the galaxy that the age of humanity being dismissed or ignored was permanently over. The ambassador displayed holographic recordings of the Battle of Three Worlds and the demonstration at Veltar Prime for the assembled delegates, who watched in horrified silence as human forces systematically destroyed military units that had been considered among the finest in the galaxy. Species that had never experienced real warfare saw what total combat looked like when conducted by experts who had spent millennia perfecting the art of destruction. Watson explained that humanity had tried following galactic protocols and requesting membership through proper channels, but the Council had responded with ultimatums and threats against human colonies. The galaxy had chosen to treat humanity as children who needed guidance rather than adults who deserved respect. That choice had consequences that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. The delegate from the Zephyrian Commonwealth rose to protest that humanity had violated every principle of civilized warfare and deserved to be expelled from galactic space for their barbaric conduct. Watson's response silenced the chamber and became one of the most quoted statements in galactic political history. She informed the Zephyrian representative that humanity did not recognize the authority of any galactic institution to determine where humans could live or how they should defend themselves. The galaxy could either learn to coexist with humanity as equals or continue to experience the consequences of treating humans as inferior beings who could be bullied into submission. Admiral Morrison transmitted a message from the newly formed human expeditionary force that was broadcast simultaneously to every inhabited system within 100 light-years of Earth. His words were simple and direct in the manner of someone who had never learned to disguise threats as diplomacy. Humanity would conduct its expansion among the stars according to its own values and interests, regardless of galactic approval. The Admiral explained that human colonies would be established wherever humanity chose to build them and would be defended by whatever means human military commanders deemed necessary. Species that chose to cooperate with human expansion would find humanity to be generous allies, but those who opposed human interests would discover what happened when they threatened the families of a species that had never known peace. Ambassador Watson continued her address to the stunned Council by outlining humanity's terms for future relations with galactic civilization. Humanity would not be joining the Council as junior members grateful for acceptance by their superiors. Instead, they would be establishing their own sphere of influence based on principles that valued individual freedom over collective security and personal achievement over social harmony. The galaxy would need to adjust to the reality that humanity possessed military capabilities that could destroy any existing power structure and the willingness to use those capabilities whenever human interests were threatened. The age of Council dominance over younger species was ending, and a new era of competitive expansion was beginning whether the galaxy liked it or not. Captain Nina Thompson broadcast a final demonstration from Veltar space where her ship remained, in orbit around the crippled homeworld of the species that had dared to threaten humanity. The quantum device planted in their star continued to broadcast readings that confirmed humanity's ability to destroy entire star systems if such action became necessary to protect human expansion. Thompson explained that similar devices had been deployed throughout Council space and would remain in place as insurance against future threats to human colonies. The galaxy now understood that attacking humanity meant risking the destruction of their own homeworlds by weapons they could not detect or disable. The balance of power had shifted permanently in favor of the species that the Council had tried to intimidate. The Council session continued for 17 hours as delegates from thousands of species tried to find some way to respond to humanity's challenge that would preserve their authority and dignity. Every proposal for sanctions or military action collapsed when military advisors explained what human retaliation would look like based on the demonstrations they had already witnessed. High Chancellor Morthan finally called for a recess when, It became clear that the Council had no effective response to humanity's transformation from ignored petitioners to galactic superpower. The Chancellor's closing words became legendary throughout the galaxy, as the moment when the old order acknowledged its own obsolescence. He stood before the empty chamber where the greatest political minds in the galaxy had gathered to solve the human problem and spoke the words that historians would remember as the end of one era and the beginning of another. Perhaps they should have simply welcomed humanity as members when they first asked for admission to galactic civilization. Ambassador Watson departed the council chambers knowing that humanity had achieved everything they had set out to accomplish. The galaxy would never again mistake human requests for permission as signs of weakness or desperation. The age of human expansion was beginning, and the stars themselves would bear witness to what a species could accomplish when they refused to accept limitations imposed by others. Admiral Morrison received confirmation that humanity's message had been received and understood throughout the galaxy. The real work of building human civilization among the stars could now begin without interference from species who had learned too late that some problems could not be solved through diplomacy or intimidation. Humanity had earned their place in the galaxy through strength and would hold that place through whatever means proved necessary.